Good morning, Brad. How are you?
I'm tired, but I'm good. How are you guys?
Awesome. What was the feel in the locker room or on that plane ride back home after this one?
They're happy. I mean, they should be. That's a great team win. They all contribute, especially on the defense. So there's not anybody who's not really pitching in, and that's a big deal when you go. If they had all of their people, it would be a big deal to go beat the defending Super Bowl champions on the road, regardless of how that team's playing. But to do it with the makeup that they have in personnel at the moment, I mean, I think it's quite an accomplishment. But it'll last until tonight, and then that's it.
So
then on to the next.
Who did you talk to in the locker room after?
I talked to Pollard briefly. I talked to Odigizua and Sam Williams, and I got to Dak, which was really interesting because I said, did you know you could be this patient? And he said, I did not. I had no idea I could be this patient. He's ready to go. I said, what is your deal? How close are you? He said, it's literally changing every day. So, but now he's ready to go in his head. Whether he's ready to go in his hand and arm or not are two different things. Babe and I were talking about it on the bus going to the airport afterwards, and from the Babe's standpoint, as someone who's been doing it for all his life, did it professionally for 8 years. He said, okay, now apparently he can grip the ball, but he hasn't thrown in a month, and so it's not going to just happen. So we'll see what this week is. But it was interesting to talk to him and talk to Zeke very briefly, who I thought was a grown-up's performance by Zeke Elliott. So a few of those guys, the defensive guys, are fun to talk to right now.
How big is the difference between the way Rush has played during this streak and the way Dak played taking over for Romo?
Well, what an interesting question. I think one of the differences is, keep in mind, we're talking about a different coaching staff except for Kellen wasn't on the coaching staff. Kellen was
player.
In fact, that's the reason Dak was playing, because
Kellen got hurt.
Kellen got hurt. That's why Dak became the backup. They didn't have the luxury of tailoring the way they called the game offensively to their defense. First of all, they didn't have a defense playing this well, and they also didn't have, like, this staff knows, I think, exactly who Cooper Rush is and isn't, and they know it better than we do, and they're less surprised than we are because they've been around him and they see him and they're in meetings with him. They really didn't know what they had in Dak in 2016. They thought they did, but I think until that day in the Coliseum in the preseason, when he came in and played against the Rams and kind of aired it out, and I know that for a fact because I remember talking to some of the front office people after that preseason game. They all looked at each other and said, "Excuse me, maybe we can actually play." And so I think that if you look at the fourth quarter last night, they kind of just played to the defense. Yeah. I give Mike McCarthy and the rest of the staff, Sean, a lot of credit for really knowing their team, and they played that game offensively to their defense. They didn't have that luxury with Dak because they didn't know exactly what he was in 2016. So this is a little more calculated, and I think that they're able to do it a little bit better.
You had mentioned Zeke a minute ago and Pollard. What did you make of the balance of carries, the load for each guy? Did you think Pollard needed more, or was it about right?
No, I think that we're seeing Pollard, RJ, there are times that I think we all agree we would like to see Pollard a little more. And I think last year was a great example, and that was last year. Yesterday afternoon, they needed the physicality of pounding it. So if I'm not mistaken, last time I looked at the stat sheet was about 2 a.m, but I think Zeke had like 15 carries and Pollard had 8. Is that close?
It was 22 to 8. Zeke
22
got 22.
to 8.
Yeah.
Okay, 22 to 8, even better. You know, one of the problems of judging a running back of Pollard's physical stature is that we see him at 8 carries and 12 carries, and we presume that he'd be the same at 22 carries. And I don't know if that's true. Zeke's built for that. That's exactly what he has trained for, and maybe why God made him the way he did. I don't know what would happen on the last 7 or 8 carries for Pollard. They may not be more than a yard or so. So I think that they used him. I think they used him pretty well. The way everybody was operating up front and the way Zeke was running yesterday, I think it was pretty good.
So what I tweeted after the game, Brad Sham here on the Fan, is I've called out the team's physicality in years past, and I felt like they could be bullied. And yesterday, there was that 5.5-minute drive where they ran the ball for the first 6 plays, and I'm like, damn, that was physical. You know, the Rams know they're trying to chew clock and everything, and the Cowboys were still able to go ahead and take almost 6 minutes off the clock. And then that drive where Fowler, Odigizua, and Gallimore just battered him the way they had beaten him up all day. Does this team seem or feel different physically to you from maybe last year or years past?
Oh, I think defensively, certainly. They've had the physicality offensively from time to time to be able to do this. And you can go all the way back to kind of before they changed offensive lines when Tyron was just a couple of years in the league and Zach was a rookie, and they had Leary and Doug Free was still playing. I mean, that was a pretty physical offensive line. Yeah, Doug Free. That's right. I said
right.
it.
There you go.
And they could pound it. And I think they still had DeMarco Murray at that point, and he was obviously an incredibly physical runner. I think there have been times offensively, Sean, where they could do that, but this defense is really unusual. And that stretch that you're talking about, and you said they pounded him, meaning Stafford, but if I'm not mistaken, they had, I think on that series, they had like 3 different guys throw runners for negative losses, 3 or 5 different defensive linemen, and you named some of them. I mean, that's really unusual. You'd have to go back. I feel fairly confident in this. You'd have to go back to the defensive front group 30 years ago in the early 90s when they got Haley. Everybody understood who Charles Haley was, and he was the difference maker for rushing the passer. And I have asked Leon Lett about this. Babe and I talked about this during the game yesterday because Leon was one of those guys. They had good players now. I'm not talking about stiffs. Russell Maryland was the first pick in the draft. Tony Casillas had been a first-round pick by Atlanta. Chad Hennings was a tremendous player, and Tony Tolbert was really good. But Leon Lett. But if you think of the Super Bowl teams, Jimmy Jones, what they had was a bunch of guys who were all good players, but they kind of pioneered in the league the way they used them. This team is the closest that I believe they have had in the number and depth of defensive linemen and the way they use them since those Super Bowl teams in the early 90s. Yesterday, I can't wait for the coaching interviews this afternoon to ask about this. So they had the first series, right? They got Dorance Armstrong, tremendous, gets the sack, fumble, Lawrence scoop and score, great. The next defensive series, they've got a whole new defensive line. They switched them all out.
Wow.
And that group, Sam Williams was one of them, and Gallimore, and I think Fowler. I mean, and that was without Bohanna. So they switched them out on the second possession, and then about the fourth possession, there was three of them and Lawrence. Then they started mixing and matching. That's a lot to throw at people, and of course their confidence is sky high right now. So the physicality you're talking about is extremely apt, and it's coming on both sides of the ball. When you can do that, then you have a chance to kind of control the tempo of how the game is being played. Now, this is a pretty good test they're going to get next Sunday night. That might be the best team in the league right now, so we'll see how that goes. But however that goes, it's one game, and I think it's only week 6, so it's kind of fun.
Is that opponent a Super Bowl contender right now?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right, because they are the Super Bowl champions,
That's
right?
true.
Like they have that title of they carried it last year. I don't believe that they are still a Super Bowl contender at this point. I think that team has a lot of offensive line woes to get past. But as a Cowboys defense, you exposed every one of them, and you made a statement from play one. And I think that's the huge factor. You didn't go into that stadium and say, "Hey, let's just see how it goes."
So one of those early plays was Dorance Armstrong forcing the fumble, Tank returning it for a touchdown. You saw the punt block. I gotta ask, were the Jones family right all along about Dorance Armstrong, or did it just take a certain amount of time for this to all work out?
All right, so if Randy Gregory was still here, Dorance Armstrong is probably not getting the same production right now. And I don't think that the Joneses are, like, as often as they talk about him on our shows, I don't think that they were going out there saying, we need more Dorance.
Right.
But listening to Jerry, as we've asked him about this on multiple different occasions, he said, look, I made the decision that what the price was for Randy and the production that we could get out of Dorance, I felt that they were equal, and I felt that we could use that money elsewhere. So, yeah, Kevin, that they talked about it for a long time,
which I know bothers people because they're like, "Weren't you going to give Randy Gregory that amount of money?"
But there was no way that Randy Gregory was not going to get the reps that Dorance Armstrong is getting right now. Dorance Armstrong probably would be on the street, but here he is at this point, and Dan Quinn is using him and maxing him out, and that's awesome. Like that's. I think that the Joneses knew his name, and I don't know exactly why it kept popping into their brain, but I don't believe that if they'd have kept Randy, that he would be doing the thing that he's doing right now. So it's awesome that he is, though. It's awesome that Jerry even said that, was it a couple weeks ago with us, whenever we were asking about opportunity, and he's just like, look, every one of these guys, and a lot of people within the organization have said this, everybody that's getting their chance is taking advantage of it.
Yeah.
Donovan Wilson, Cooper Rush, Noah Brown. Noah Brown's a great example of this.
Dante
Dude that's
Fowler.
been on this team for a long time and just wasn't getting the reps.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
now here he is. He's getting the reps and he's taking advantage of it. And Kevin, I don't know if that's the golden horseshoe or if there's something else that explains it. Maybe it is just the simple fact that they put the work in and they're ready for the moment.
It does kind of feel like they have that golden horseshoe. And Dorance he's 25. It's on a 2-year, $12 or $13 million deal. Only counts against the cap $3.5 million this season. He also blocked a field goal against the Giants, and he's on pace for 13.5 sacks. It is, the production that he's had is truly incredible.
And like 5 block punts, too.
Yes, the block field goal, block punt. He's been a special teams monster. I saw the stat from the Dallas Cowboys is Dorance Armstrong had a sack and a block punt yesterday. The second time in his career he's done that. Him and Tim Harris,
Of course.
are the only players since 1982 to record 2 games with a sack and a block punt. Now, of course, 1982 is when sacks became official, so who the hell knows before that? But that's pretty amazing.
Holy crap. Tim Harris had 81 sacks in his career. One year he had 19 and a half.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, this defensive line is super special. And I don't know if this is going to be the truth or not, but it's starting to look even better than the Super Bowl winning Cowboys that I was in high school for. And 92, I always think of Tony Tolbert when I see number 92. If you grew up and you're my age and you were watching the Cowboys and that was your team back then. But with him and DeMarcus Lawrence and obviously Micah Parsons, I was watching some ESPN this morning, and Rex Ryan, who's been around the game for a long time and was the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens who won the Super Bowl. He said, which was surprising to me because usually you don't say this about guys that you know well. He said he never had a Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons is one of the best defensive players he's ever seen. And he said, look, I had Ray Lewis, I had Ed Reed, I had Terrell Suggs. Those are all very good players and great players in their own right. This guy's better. And I was just surprised when Rex Ryan said Micah Parsons is one of the best defensive players he's ever seen. And he never was able to coach a guy that good.
Do you think then, I know right now he's the favorite, that he will win Defensive Player of the Year?
As long as he stays healthy. Obviously, there's a little bit of the leg issue right now that you have to get over and pretty much play most of the season, if not all of the season. That being said, yes, and then I know it won't happen because of the way quarterbacks are in today's MVP voting. I think he should strongly be considered right now as MVP of the NFL.
Wow. Okay. I mean, J.J. Watt several years ago, I know, finished second.
Yeah.
So,
and I know there's Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, which is going to be, and I know that, I throw average, but everybody thinks I'm the greatest quarterback of all time. Jalen Hurts is going to get a lot of votes right now. But I do think that Micah Parsons should be part of the NFL MVP conversation. So, yes, Defensive Player of the Year right now. Yes, for sure. MVP conversation. Yes. Would I put him number one? Probably not, but I think he should be in the conversation with the quarterbacks.
Do you know how many players, who leads the NFL in sacks right now?
I don't know. I would guess Micah has 6.
Matt Judon, Nick Bosa, and Micah are all tied with 6 at the moment.
Okay.
So Bosa's name, I think, still gets thrown into it, especially the way that they're playing defense right now, too. Like, that defense is playing really well. Bradley Chubb's at 5.5, and Alex Highsmith is at 5.5 too. So I think it will then come down to forced fumbles and all those other extra things. And just when I watch the guy play, though, I mean, he jumps off the screen. And maybe it's just because I haven't seen a player like him in all of my years of watching the Cowboys.
Does Dorance jump off the screen to you at all? Not in the Micah way. Like, nobody jumps off the screen in the Micah way. But
like in the Tony Tolbert way, yes.
Okay.
Opposite of Charles Haley, yes. That type of deal, yes. Man, he is really good. But am I going to put I almost went Tony Tolbert. Am I going to put Dorance Armstrong in the J.J. Watt, T.J. Watt, Micah Parsons, Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor, Myles Garrett? Right? No, I can't. But he's a very good opposite of your best guy defensive end.
Yeah, and it looks like, the other thing to add to that is when Micah, you can move all over the field, right? Dorance isn't just lining up in one spot either. Those guys seem to swap and move all over the place, and so there's a lot of different looks that this defense can give. That's great flexibility.
And to Dorance Armstrong, and I think he's having a great year. That's why I'm putting this as maybe the best defensive line I've ever seen in my Cowboys lifetime. I wasn't alive for Doomsday 1 or Doomsday 2. Is they're triple teaming Micah. Double teaming every time, possibly triple teaming at times. And I think Dan Quinn's doing a good job of moving him around, trying to avoid that, but he still gets to the quarterback on triple teams. They're not double teaming Dorance Armstrong. Teams have not decided, you know what Dorance is doing? We need to concentrate 2 guys on him because they can't. Because when you have 6 or 7 guys blocking, like when they go to 7 guys blocking, teams will do that against the Cowboys because they're so good right now. They say, all right, you 3 block number 11. You 4 take on the other 3 guys.
Right.
I mean, that's what teams are deciding to do. If 6 guys are blocking, 2 guys take Micah most of the time, and you other 4 guys take the other 3 guys.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm looking at pressures and all that other stuff that goes along with it too. And I'm trying to figure out where the Micah ranks on the hurries list, and he's right there at the top of that too. This defensive line right now is just it's too much fun. And somebody's texting in and saying, let's trade Hill and Gallimore for Quentin Williams. No, sorry. Not the way that I'm watching even Hill, even the way that he's playing right now. I'm like, oh, man, I didn't see it happening this year. I thought he would be gone. I really thought that the middle of that defense was going to be strictly down to like the Bohannas and Gallimore and Osa. By the way, Mike, we watched Osa and Gallimore in preseason. We were like, man, our guards are in a lot of trouble. But it turns out that those guys are actually as good as they were looking in camp, and they're ready for this next level of things.
I was listening to 105.3 The Fan driving to my parents yesterday before the game, so I'm listening to the pregame show here, and I don't know who was talking. I apologize for that. But it was an offensive lineman for the Cowboys talking about how much it helps to practice against this defensive line.
Yeah.
To your point,
yeah,
it did not look good in training camp. I'm like, oh my God, we are going to get Dak killed. And I know the first game he did get hit quite a bit and did get hurt. But part of that is this no offensive line has figured out how to block this defensive line yet. And look, there's still quite a few games to go to see what happens, but right now, no offensive line can block this defensive line.
Yeah, and that's what it starts in the middle, works its way outside with the pressure that they're able to get, and it's just a good thing. And then, Kevin, what happens whenever you're getting that kind of pressure? A hooker makes a play, right?
Best play of the day.
Like that.
I'll go ahead and say we can speak for all hookers. That was the best play of the day.
Let's talk about some of these thoughts from the game. That's Blogging the Boys does an awesome job putting out their 10 thoughts on the Cowboys' 22-10 win, which you heard right here on your home, the Cowboys, 105.3 The Fan. And right now, I think we have to talk about that defense. It delivered again. And if we're putting this on a scale of 1 to 10, like Cowboys' excitement for this defense, I think it's at an all-time 10. They're allowing a touchdown a game. It's another game they haven't allowed over 20 points. I think it's the best defense in football. They're the third best scoring defense behind only the Bills and the 49ers, but it's hard to say right now they're not the best. If you want to argue maybe the Niners or the Bills are better, fine, go for it. But the Cowboys right now are in the conversation for the best in football, and it's not even close.
Yeah, this reminds me more of like young D. Ware under Bill and Wade, where you had a really, really good defense and, you have a couple of big stars here, but I'm still waiting, Wolchuk. Brian, I want your ruling on this because I think Wolchuk is rolling his eyes at my strong assertion followed up with evidence that the running game is more important than it's been in a decade in the NFL. And he won't acknowledge that the lack of ability to stop the run is holding this defense back. Give me the scout's opinion.
Well, I was surprised that with yesterday, the Rams never tried really any perimeter runs. That's where Dallas has done a decent job of defending inside runs. It's the perimeter runs that have given him the most problems. And I was, it's like the Rams, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, get the ball to the edge. They challenged Diggs with a throw and stuff like that. And Diggs played well on the outside, but they didn't really try and capture the edge. I mean, I'll tell you this, the Cowboys defenders did a really good job, and I know I'm trying to get to your question, but I'm saying, like, Higbee and those tight ends for the Rams couldn't block the edges yesterday. Even when they had the opportunity, but I'm surprised they didn't try and do it. But I think that, to me, this is going to be the test this week. This is going, when you start to talk about the defense and how it's one of the best in the NFL and all that, this is the team that's going to test every bit of that when you start to talk about the Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
Because they will be, their quarterback will run it, all three of their backs will run it, they'll be physical up front. This is, if you find a way to shut them down and make this guy sit in the pocket and beat you throwing the football, that to me, that's the best path for victory.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to see. I know the Eagles just watching a little bit of the games, but I can't wait to watch the all 22 of how they're doing it. But I just feel like, though, that I can't say it's the best defense because I do think there's some limitations they do have on the edge.
Yes.
But I haven't seen. I didn't see the Rams challenge it.
Right.
but I'll see if these guys will challenge it, and I think they will.
Yesterday they allowed 39 yards on the ground. Why do you think I'm rolling my eyes at you for that? I'm a big run the football guy and stop the run guy. I'm not anti-run game.
What was it that I said last week that you disagreed with strongly? Oh, that defenses are playing the pass so much now, and you got to run the football. And you said, no, they're not playing the pass. Offensive linemen are just broke.
Oh, yeah, I just think the offensive lines are bad right now.
Yeah.
And that's a big reason why the scoring's down.
So you are a big believer in the run. So
I'm about running the ball.
Aren't you insisting that this Cowboys team goes out against good running teams and shuts them down before you can really call them a great defense, knowing what kind of teams you're going to face?
I think you have a point there. I think they do need to prove that they can stop a dominant running team before they're an elite defense. Absolutely.
You go out and
that's a fair criticism.
I think it's going to be tough to shut the Eagles down completely, but you've got to find a way though to not let them just roll over you on this. I mean, to me,
Mailata and Sumalo are both hurt.
Yeah,
so.
That's the Cowboys could be catching some.
Sure.
The Cowboys have done a great job of playing against some offensive lines that have been less than healthy and perfect.
Yeah.
So to me, give me all 5 of those guys. I think there's going to be a plan this week. Is you can't let their center. You can't let him play in a way where he's second level blocking and getting up, and scoop. Put a big body over him. Put somebody big over his nose, and don't let him do these things that we've seen. With Kelsey. Kelsey's one of those guys that can. We always say in scouting, cut a defense in half. Because he's second level. And now Van Der Esch and those guys are struggling. And we see what happens when those guys get caught on blocks.
Right.
The ball gets the edge, it gets around the corner, and it gets up the field for 20-something yards.
And a running quarterback, right?
And
what does a guy like Jalen Hurts do? I mean, we've
Yeah.
seen guys like Lamar Jackson feast against them in years past. Josh Allen
Daniel
was great.
Jones ran it pretty well on him the other
he did,
day.
yeah.
So that to me that's the biggest thing I'm worried about that offense is Jalen Hurts and his running ability. Because that is just one of the most difficult things in the sport to have to deal with defensively, a quarterback that can tuck it and run on you, and he's that guy that can tuck and run and design runs. The dude's a monster that way. Just so everybody is aware, the advanced metrics would tell you Dallas has the 6th best defense right now. San Francisco is number 1, Buffalo 2, Tampa 3, Philly 4, Denver 5. So not that means everything, but just to give the people an idea. And like San Francisco is number 1 overall. They got their 5th in the pass defense and their 1st in the run defense.
Denver's all done on the pass, right? Isn't their metrics show that they're really good against the pass, but they're secondary?
Correct.
Yeah, they got a good secondary. But pass rush wise, I don't think it's close.
No.
Right?
Yeah,
You're taking the Cowboys.
Pass rush wise, absolutely. It's the Cowboys, and now that San Francisco, I think Bosa banged up his groin yesterday.
Yeah.
Only he wasn't man enough to go back out there like our guy Micah Parsons was.
No, and that would be number 2 on these 10 thoughts is Micah. And it's just, he's got the groin injury, but he's now got 6 sacks on the year. It's his 3rd multi-sack game of the season. And what he was able to do, even with the groin, he comes back in the second half, and he's clearly limping in between plays. He's having to take certain snaps off. They're trying to help him out there, but he's out there, and once the ball is snapped, it's like nothing's wrong with him. He's not showing any ailments.
He's all man. Yeah, he was having to pinch his groin like a 6-year-old dancing, having to get to the restroom. And then when it started, the play started, I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't imagine that he was going from that hurt to that dominant. It gave me flashbacks of Steve Young back in the day when he'd be limping into the huddle and could barely walk, and then they'd hike it and he'd go on like a 40-yard run. Brian, I'm sure you remember that.
No, those were days that, you're absolutely right about that. He'd kind of make you feel like, he's really banged up. We got him right now, and then all of a sudden you're right. There he goes out the back door for a big gain.
That's a vet move right there. And Micah Parsons, by the way, the only player in the NFL that is in the top 3 of sacks, tackles for loss, and hits on the quarterback this season.
Yeah, he's been great. And Osadizu was great yesterday, too. Yesterday, number 3, like all or nothing, it was all big plays. For the Rams, you had the big 54-yard Tutu Atwell play. Then you had the huge Cooper Kupp touchdown for the Cowboys.
75 yards. Yeah.
It was the big Tony Pollard run. There weren't many sustained long drives. It was, all right, boom, home run kind of play, or nothing's happening in this one. It was very good defense. How about Michael Gallup at number 4? He had the huge drop on third down where you made the point, Brian. You kind of thought maybe he was closer to the sideline.
I thought he was trying to toe tap that thing, and he was a lot further away than he thought. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he comes back, a huge catch, 3rd and 15, somehow, which he always does. I mean, he's the best at this. The magician-like, get your toes down on the sideline, a thing of beauty for 26 yards. Redemption for MG.
He's incredible, man.
Gorgeous.
I guess it kind of cost him his ACL last year, but his ability to make sure he's going to get his feet down and then contort and reach and bend and still have the focus to get his hands on the ball while he knows where his feet are coming down. It's absurd. It's a next level talent that I'm not sure how many we've seen like this.
Yeah, in real time, while I'm in my parents' living room, we're all watching the game, and everybody's immediately like, oh, there's no way he caught that. And from the TV angle, you're like, how the heck could he have kept his feet in bounds to be able to actually have pulled that off? And then you see the replay, and you see the still shot picture that someone took, and it's just like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
This ballerina. Dude, man.
Beautiful. Number 5, just one of those forgotten plays. Rams trying to come back. That 51-yard field goal that Matt Gay misses would have cut it to a 6-point, 1-score game. That was huge for the Cowboys there. And when we were sitting in here, we're like, leak, hook it. And yes, we were celebrating watching that Matt Gay miss. I thought that was big for momentum.
The defense gives you the confidence.
It does, no question. After that, it's like, okay, they're not scoring. There's no way.
Do it twice.
Number 6, though, goes back to special teams. How huge was it overall? Dorance Armstrong, with the block. But Brett Maher, again, 3 for 3. He's the first Cowboys kicker. We had this in the postgame notes to have multiple 3 field goal make games since Richie Cunningham did it for the Cowboys in the late 90s. Crazy.
Wow.
Crazy.
He's dialed in. He figured something out in his time off from his first Cowboys stint.
Number 7, Dorance Armstrong. I mean, you made the point earlier. Could this guy have superstar type upside? He might. With the way he's impacting games, not only just defensively, but special teams wise, 25 years old. Sky's the limit for him. Number 8, I think Tyler Smith clearly had it was a rough first half, but a learning type of game for him against Aaron Donald. Made some necessary adjustments. Hopefully, this is one he learns from it. He just gets better from it.
That's his real welcome to the NFL moment.
Had 2 really bad plays. That was it.
Yeah. Number 9, though, defensively, again, they got off the field on third down, but I want to give some love to 2 guys, Osa Digizua and Malik Hooker. I thought they both were outstanding, and they both quietly are the best at their positions. Malik Hooker, I think, is graded out as the 4th best free safety in football this year. Osa, I mentioned this earlier, 2nd most pressures from a defensive tackle behind Aaron Donald in the NFL. Osa had the most hits on the quarterback yesterday with 4 among any Cowboys. And lastly, number 10, the stage is now set. Sunday Night Football right here on the Fan against the Eagles for the NFC East, 5-0. Let's go ahead to the link and beat up on the Birds, shall we?